Welcome back to my channel, DebtFree.cf. I'm going to go over how to set up a monthly budget on a bi-weekly paycheck. I know that I had mentioned in December last year that I was going to do that here in January, so this is the setup that I'm going through for that. So here we've got at the top, this is the same setup in general as my other monthly budgets that you can see in any of the examples, and then if you want a tutorial, there's some separate videos of how to actually structure this and then how to format it. So you can check those out both for Google Sheets, which is what we're looking at right now, and Excel spreadsheets as well, which just got added in December. Now ideally I would have posted this right at the beginning of January, but I was out of town and didn't have my video editing stuff, and then I actually got the flu, so that's going around, no fun, but here I am able to talk and ready to show you what I'm doing. So I've got January 2018 labeled here at the top, and then I've labeled this one bi-weekly, and then at the bottom of my tabs I'm going to have a running tally of all of the tabs of the different months throughout the whole year. So this entire workbook will be 2018, and then each worksheet or each sheet will be one of the months. And then I'm just going to happen to have two for January because one's the example for the bi-weekly setup and then one is the example for the monthly setup. So I'm just expanding this column a little bit so that we can look at some of the numbers. So this one's a little bit more of a rough draft. I do, of course, still start with the estimated and then keep track of the actual of what income I expect to come in, and then what the planned outgo or the expenses, some of them being hard and known, and some of them being a little bit fluctuating based on month to month. So for January, the first week when I was out of town, I was staying with family. So I actually didn't have to purchase any food myself except for like when I went out for dinner with a couple of friends on a couple of different of the evenings. So in general, the budget for my groceries is going to be a little bit lower this month because I was spending it more like in the fun category than I was in the grocery category. My estimated income, we'll find out when I go through the different pay periods, is probably going to be a little bit higher. Some of the reasoning behind that is the paycheck is received 2 weeks after the work has been actually worked, and so it's going to include holidays. I worked on Christmas and I worked on New Year's, and so both of those will be time and a half or double pay or whatever it is. So I've got those numbers just kind of low because I'd rather be over, have more money that can then be allotted to something else than to be over guessing, be short on money, and then have to rearrange numbers to try to scramble to cover a bill. The other thing that I want to note about doing a bi-weekly budget is some of these numbers in terms of when certain things are going to be paid will not match up with the income that has already come in for the month. It'll almost look like I'm borrowing against myself in order to cover part of the bill, and that's exactly the truth. So you have to keep in mind that you would need to actually have some money in the bank. So if you're following some of the baby steps with Dave Ramsey, that's where part of the $1,000 comes in, because it's sort of, you have to be kind of working a month ahead, but in order to get to the point where you can work ahead, you need to have a little bit in your account at the end of the previous month that's left over. That's kind of what you can use for budgeting as you go forward. So, for example, in December, there was a part of a check where a couple days of that check needed to still be usable for the first couple of days of January. So the calculation that I have was roughly $370 from the check that I got towards the end of December should really be used in January's budget. So I added that over here. And then in terms of the amount that I already got, the date on January 5th, so deposited it into my account on January 5th, was about $1,700. That because I'm a couple days into the month now, I can tell you that. But I would have been guessing this would have been maybe about 12 or 1400, and then the other one 12 or 1400. So my numbers were a little bit low, like I said, but I'd rather be low in my estimate so that I end up better off later in the month. So in this column here, column E, everything that is either already in my bank account or something that is the first little bit of paycheck that I have to use in the month, plus, for example, the roommate's contribution to the rent portion. So those income pieces tallied up then have to be used to pay the bills in order of when they're due. So, of course, on the first of the month, rent is due. Now, obviously, my $1,570 is not enough to cover the $2,000 of rent. So here's where I would have to use part of my buffer that's already in my bank account so that I'm not actually going negative in order to pay the bill, or in this case, like I'm not giving a check that's going to bounce. And then utilities also need to be paid up front, but it turns out that the actual due date of a lot of those utilities is like the 7th or the 10th. So in this particular month's example, it actually would work that I could apply the next incoming check towards that. I've already calculated it against the rent equivalent that my roommate pays those particular utilities because I pay the rent. So it's just kind of a division of labor. So I'm going to move that into the other column, where anything from the 5th to the 19th in that time frame will be paid out of the other check. So I just shifted that a little bit. I'm not going anywhere in terms of driving for the first week because I was visiting family. Additionally, the amount of driving that I do is so little that sometimes in an entire month I don't even fill up my car. So I just kind of guesstimate at the $25, and if I don't use it, I don't use it. The rest of it just kind of becomes like a sinking fund for the next $25 I might use. Whatever. Cell phone needs to be paid at the beginning of the month. So these things that look like fractions are really how much I've paid towards that bill out of how much the bill is actually going to cost, or what the value of that category is. So if I go back to the groceries row here, I've got that groceries are going to be roughly $250, probably a little bit lower even. And so since I don't need to purchase that in the first week because of staying with family, I really need to just divvy up between the other 4 weeks or the other 3.5 weeks of the month. And I'm going to put more towards the beginning of the time where I'm actually going to be making purchases, because then leftovers and so forth can carry over into the next week or the next set of weeks. The pet costs is me contributing to a sinking fund. So knowing that every couple of months I'm going to order a shipment of food and supplies from Chewy.com, and I'm not like an affiliate, but I use Chewy.com. They're amazing. I've never had a problem with anything where payment packages weren't late, which is really well done on their part. And then if I have had a problem, for example, they put a giant plastic tub of cat litter in with a small bag of dog food, and the dog food bag exploded, and there was just food everywhere in the box. Now I could salvage it, but they were really kind of resistant to me salvaging it. I just called them to let them know that the packaging was poorly done. I wasn't expecting them to refund it or ship me another bag of dog food. I was just going to pour the dog food into a container out of the box. But they were like, no, it's dirty. Don't feed that to your dog. If it's mixed with the cat litter, it's really not a good idea. I was like, the cat litter didn't start exploding. It's just the dog food. But they shipped me the exact same bag of dog food again. So I ended up with more dog food than I needed. But, it's just a really good customer service thing on their part. So I do that for all of my animals. I don't have to go to the store, except occasionally I take the dog in to get his nails did. So that kind of thing. So since I don't need to pay anything for that upfront or at any specific date, I just know that I need to save that particular amount over the course of the month and leading up to the next month. That's why it's going to be in the last paycheck, just for allocation purposes. I don't expect any healthcare costs. I don't have any upcoming appointments where I know I have a copay, but if I did, that would go in there. Car insurance went up a little bit. It used to be like $32 a month, and now it's like $36 a month, and I don't know why, because there's been no claims and no accidents, and the cars are now older, so they're worth less. So I don't know why I'm paying more to insure it. I'll have to find that out. But I'm also on a family plan, so I'm not really the one that has to find that out, but I want to know. And then I have here that in the category of just like fun and everything else, I usually spend probably around $200 in a month, give or take, depending on what kind of plans I have. So I'm going to guesstimate $200 because I was traveling and eating out and seeing friends and giving some gifts and so forth. I took out $80 from the ATM already. So I'm just going to put that in this first category. And then I'm going to contribute to retirement. My goal is $500 this month and next month to wrap up the end of 2017 to fill my Roth IRA. So I know that I need exactly $500 in there. And then kind of everything else is going to be based off of what comes in and what kind of fun things and whatnot that cost a little bit of money that I decide to do through the month. So all in all, this is kind of the layout and the plan. The $80 only is in the first column, not because of necessarily affordability of it out of the income, but because date-wise, that's when it was pulled out and used. But I actually have $20 left over, so I'm just going to say 80 out of 60, which is going to look kind of silly in terms of trying to do math. And then retirement will be at the end of the month. I'll send it in, so we can just put that there. And then I'm saving up and planning to go to Korea for visiting a friend who's moving there. And that'll be hopefully sometime in June. Dates are not set, but I want to make sure that I save for it for whenever I decide dates and need to book the flight. So I'm starting to save for that already. And I'm going to kind of leave that at this point in terms of the biweekly for kind of the setup and a like 1/3 of the way through the month check-in. And then I will come back to this later in the month and fill it in and kind of update some of the numbers with the remainings and so forth. But this is just to give you an idea of if you're doing a bi-weekly schedule, like you're trying to match your bi-weekly checks that come in to how to pay your bills in a particular priority of by the date they're due. Although you also want to keep in mind the priority of that food and like all of your utilities really come first. Rent also needs to come first because it's usually on the first of the month, but sometimes you have a grace period of 1 or 2 days, and especially if you're forthright with your landlord, even like 2 days before the month ends for the previous month, if you know that you need an extra couple days, sometimes they'll be accommodating and waive the late fee if you have one, or they'll just feel like you're more responsible because you've recognized that you need to inform them of what's going on, even if you end up still making it by the end of the grace period where you don't get any kind of late penalty. And it's going to determine, the leeway is going to be determined a lot by whether you're part of an apartment complex that's run by a corporation or if you have an individual landlord. But just a side note. So yeah, this is the bi-weekly setup and check-in, and I will see you in a later video to kind of come back and revisit some of these numbers and fill the rest in. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.